The thing I keep seeing in my head is Jason standing there taking the blame before anyone else can even understand what just happened. Not because he has some grand plan. Not because he thinks he can talk his way out of it. Jason Morgan has never really been that kind of man. He sees danger. He calculates the cost. And if someone younger, weaker, or more innocent is standing near the fire, he steps into it himself. And that is exactly why this whole situation does not sit right with me. I know the surface version of this story. Jason was caught in that violent mess with Ross Cullum. Rocco fired the shot. Jason took the fall. WSB dragged him off to Jakarta. Steve Burton has made it clear that this is not some permanent goodbye, and the timeline points toward Jason coming back to General Hospital sometime after he returns to work. That is the basic version. That is the easy version. But I cannot help but feel that the truth could be more complicated than it looks. Because Jason being held by the WSB is one thing, Jason being useful to the WSB is something else entirely. And the more I sit with it, the more I feel like GH may not be setting up a rescue story. It may be setting up a control story. Maybe Jason is not going to escape their grip. Maybe he is going to be released because they want him released. Maybe his return to Port Charles is not freedom at all. Maybe it is a leash. There is something about this that does not feel right to me, especially when I think about Rocco. Jason taking the blame makes emotional sense. Of course he would protect that boy. Of course he would rather destroy his own life than let Rocco carry the weight of that moment. But from a story perspective, it feels too clean, too perfectly convenient. Jason removes himself from Port Charles. WSB gains power over him. Rocco is protected, at least for now. And everyone else is left believing Jason is just trapped in some foreign legal nightmare. But what if that was the point? What if Jason was never the problem WSB wanted to solve? What if Jason was the weapon they wanted to move? I may be overthinking this, but I keep going back to the idea that Ross Cullum was not just some corrupt agent who happened to collide with Jason at the wrong time. There has to be more behind him. A man like that does not operate alone. He does not end up in that exact place at that exact moment with Jason, Britt, and Rocco all pulled into the same orbit unless there is a larger hand somewhere in the shadows. And I know General Hospital sometimes asks us to accept coincidence, but this one feels too loaded to be just coincidence. If Jason returns in July or August, I do not think he should come back clean. I do not think he should walk into Port Charles like a man who has beaten the system again. That would almost feel too easy. What would haunt me more is if he comes back quiet, watchful, strange even for Jason, like a man who has made a deal he cannot talk about. And maybe that is where the real story begins. I can picture him returning without telling Carly first. That alone would feel wrong. Jason and Carly have a bond that usually survives distance, death, lies, and all the impossible things this show throws at them. But if he comes back and avoids her, that would say everything. Not because he does not love her. Maybe because he loves her too much. Maybe because whatever WSB has wrapped around him becomes dangerous the second Carly knows about it. I could be wrong, but I feel like Jason's silence might become the biggest spoiler of all. Sonny would notice it too. He always does, even when he pretends not to. Sonny depends on Jason's loyalty in a way that is deeper than business. It is almost spiritual at this point. Like Jason is the one person Sonny expects to understand. The parts of him he cannot explain. So if Jason comes back and does not immediately fall back into that role, if he keeps his distance, if he starts moving around Port Charles like he is following orders from someone else, Sonny's not going to take that lightly. And that is where this could get painful. Because Jason may be loyal to Sonny, but Jason is also loyal to the innocent. And if WSB has Rocco hanging over his head, then Jason may be forced to choose silence over honesty. He may have to let Sonny think the worst of him. He may have to let Carly feel shut out. He may even have to make Anna suspicious, which is dangerous because Anna knows the WSB too well to accept a simple explanation. There is a possibility that Anna becomes the first person to sense the shape of the trap. Not the details, maybe not at first, but the pattern. She knows what institutions do when they want to protect themselves. She knows how intelligence agencies bury their mistakes. And if Jason suddenly appears back in Port Charles after being held in Jakarta, I do not believe Anna would just shrug and accept it. She would ask who signed off on it. She would ask why. She would ask what the WSB got in exchange. That is the question I keep returning to. What do they get? Because WSB does not just hand Jason Morgan back to Port Charles out of kindness. If they let him go, or pretend to let him go, there has to be a reason. Maybe they need him to flush someone out. Maybe they believe a traitor inside their own organization has connections in Port Charles. Maybe Ross Cullum knew something before he was shot. And maybe Jason is the only person close enough to the right people to expose the truth. Or maybe Jason himself has been framed into becoming bait. That possibility bothers me the most, because it turns his sacrifice into something uglier. He thought he was protecting Rocco. But what if someone counted on that? What if someone knew Jason would take the fall the second Rocco was in danger? That is the kind of manipulation that would cut deeper than a physical threat. It would mean Jason's best quality, his instinct to protect, was used against him. And honestly, that feels very General Hospital to me. The show has always been at its strongest when the danger is not just outside the character, but inside their loyalties. Jason can fight armed men. He can survive explosions. He can disappear and come back again. But how does he fight a situation where telling the truth hurts the people he is trying to save? How does he win when the weapon pointed at him is not a gun, but a child's future? Rocco is the emotional center of this for me. I do not think the show should forget what this means for him. He may have pulled that trigger to stop something worse from happening, but he is still a kid. That kind of moment does not vanish just because Jason steps in and says it was him. In fact, Jason's sacrifice might make Rocco feel even more guilty. And if someone in WSB knows that, then Rocco becomes more than a protected child. He becomes leverage. That is the part I hate, and also the part I think could make this story powerful. Because Jason would endure almost anything for himself. But if someone threatens to reopen the case, expose Rocco, drag him into some international mess, Jason would obey, at least for a while. He would take the orders, he would keep the secrets, he would let everyone misunderstand him if that was the price. But the problem with Jason is that he only stays controlled until he figures out who is pulling the strings. And I think Britt may matter more than people expect. I keep wondering what she saw, what she heard, what she picked up in those final moments before everything collapsed. Britt is not someone I can easily imagine being just a passenger in this storyline. She has survived too much, lied too well, loved too dangerously. If she was there when Cullum's mask began to slip, then maybe she holds a piece of the truth Jason does not even know yet. There is a chance Britt becomes a person who understands why Jason is acting differently before Carly does. And I know that would stir up emotion, because Jason's connections are never simple. Carly has history with him that feels almost unbreakable. Britt has that sharper, unfinished energy, the kind that makes everything feel unresolved. If both women are pulled into this return, I could see Jason being torn in a quiet, painful way. Not necessarily romantically, not even obviously. More like emotionally cornered. Carly demands the truth because she knows him. Britt suspects the truth because she was there. And Jason, as always, says almost nothing. That silence could drive the whole summer. Spinelli is another piece I cannot ignore. If Jason is being monitored, if there is some hidden WSB file, if Jakarta is more than just a location on a map, then Spinelli is the one who could find the first crack. Maybe he discovers erased records. Maybe he finds a strange signal sent from Cullum's device before the shooting. Maybe he realizes the message did not go back to WSB headquarters at all. Maybe it went to someone in Port Charles. That is the twist I would love and fear at the same time. Because if Cullum had a contact in Port Charles, then Jason's return becomes much bigger than one man coming home. It means there is a traitor nearby. Someone familiar. Someone who has been watching the aftermath, maybe even benefiting from Jason being gone. And that would make every scene feel different. Every quiet conversation would carry suspicion. Every familiar face would feel slightly off. I keep asking myself, who would want Jason removed from the board? Not killed, necessarily. Removed, silenced, contained. That is a very specific kind of move. It suggests someone needed time. Someone needed Port Charles to shift while Jason was unable to interfere. Maybe it connects to Sonny's world, maybe it connects to Pikeman type shadows, maybe it connects to old WSB secrets that were never fully buried. Or maybe GH is going somewhere more personal, and the person behind this understands Jason not as an enemy, but as a pattern. Because Jason is predictable in one way. He will protect always. That predictability is his strength, but it is also his weakness. And if someone built a trap around that, then Jason's return may not be triumphant at all. It may be the moment the trap tightens. What I do not want is a simple jailbreak story. I do not want Jason to just punch his way out of Jakarta and appear at Carly's door like nothing happened. I want the weight. I want the discomfort. I want him back in Port Charles, but not really back. I want people to feel the difference in him before they understand it. I want Carly to know something is wrong without being able to prove it. I want Sonny to feel betrayed even though Jason is still protecting him in some twisted way. I want Anna to follow the WSB trail and realize this is not just about Jason. It is about something rotten still hiding in plain sight. And maybe, somewhere in the middle of all of that, Ross Cullum wakes up, not as the final answer, not as the clean villain confession, but as the person who says just enough to make everything worse. Maybe he reveals that Jason was never supposed to be imprisoned forever. Maybe he says someone wanted Jason returned to Port Charles under WSB control. Maybe he hints that the person who gave the order is already close enough to watch Jason struggle. I do not know. I might be wrong about all of this. Maybe the show really is just setting up Steve Burton's return with a temporary obstacle and a dramatic rescue. That could happen. But I cannot shake the feeling that Jason's absence has created a space in the story for something darker, something more strategic. Something that makes his return feel less like an ending and more like the beginning of a new kind of captivity. Because Jason Morgan coming home should feel like relief. But what if it does not? What if the first time we see him back in Port Charles, the emotion is not joy, but unease? What if he looks at the people he loves and cannot tell them what he has promised? What if every step he takes is being watched? What if Rocco's safety depends on Jason becoming exactly what WSB needs him to be? That is where I am stuck. Jason has survived death, enemies, memory loss, betrayal, and every impossible twist GH has thrown at him. But this feels different in my head. This is not about whether Jason can survive. He can. He always does. The real question is what survival costs him this time. And if Jason returns, carrying a secret that protects Rocco, but slowly destroys his trust with Carly, Sonny, Anna, Britt, and everyone who still believes they know him, then I have to wonder something that makes me uncomfortable. When Jason Morgan finally comes home, will he actually be free? Or will Port Charles simply become the next prison WSB built around him?